If you're a college football fan, you have been keeping a very close eye on the transfer portal. Now, if you're a diehard college football fan, if you're a junkie, the kind that likes to tune into shows like this year-round, you've been keeping a close eye on what the number one player in the transfer portal has been up to. 6'4", right around 300 pounds, defensive lineman from Texas A&M, Walter Nolen, just took a visit to Oregon, and he's now going to take a visit to Ole Miss. So what does this mean for Walter Nolen? What does it mean for Lane Kiffin and company? What does it mean for just the transfer portal overall? We'll talk about all those things here in just a second. First things first, though, make sure you subscribe right here to the On3 YouTube channel. Going to keep you in the know for all things transfer portal, all things college football, 365 days a year. We are live on this show, The Hard Count, tomorrow morning, Tuesday, 11 a.m. Eastern. Once y'all dialed in, get in the live chat, we'll have a good time. We appreciate y'all in advance for being dialed in. Also follow me on Twitter and Instagram at JDPakel. So when I saw Walter Nolen was taking a visit to Ole Miss, had a couple of immediate thoughts, but the first of which being, this is a part of the next step for Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, because they've been good now the last couple of years. Had 2 10-win seasons the last 3 years. Lane Kiffin starting to build that thing up and continues to utilize the portal well. But the difference between Ole Miss being good in the SEC and then competing for SEC titles, what separates them from a school like Alabama and Georgia, having the big boys. And the big boys, I promise you, they resemble a lot of what Walter Nolen looks like. So adding him to your roster and building upon those trenches, that's what's going to make Lane Kiffin's team that much better. That's what's going to get them to winning SEC championships instead of just competing in the West, and I guess the West doesn't even exist anymore, competing within the SEC to get to Atlanta. Okay, so when you look at what they have right now, you have to imagine with Lane Kiffin running the show, the offense year in and year out, the pieces might change. There might be needs at some positions more than others year in and year out. But overall, I think most people feel pretty confident in saying the offense will be dynamic more often than not in any given year. The offense probably won't be the issue more often than not when it comes to Ole Miss. So what do you look to? The defensive side of the ball, right? The price of admission in the SEC. And it's not getting any easier with Oklahoma and Texas joining the conference. Ole Miss allowed 4 yards a carry last year. It's not horrible. A lot of schools, I promise you, they would kill to only allow 4 yards a carry. However, in the SEC, again, going back to the main goal, to beat Georgia, to beat Alabama, you got to have players like Walter Nolen in the interior. And this is something that Lane Kiffin very, very clearly understands. He was asked after the Georgia game, what made the difference, what happened tonight, questions like that. And he gave an answer during his post-game press conference that I thought was very telling and I think should encourage Ole Miss fans when you talk about this recruitment for Walter Nolen. He was like, listen, we signed 1 5-star. What did Georgia have, 20-something? Signing a guy like Walter Nolen is an effort to close that talent gap. Because another post-game press conference lives in my mind rent-free of Lane Kiffin and his time at Ole Miss. I believe it was after they lost to Alabama. I want to say it was 2 years ago. He said, listen, we didn't come here, meaning his staff and Lane Kiffin, to Ole Miss. We didn't come here just to cover spreads and lose close and compete and look good and thank the fans. We didn't come here for that. We came here to win. Okay, so going after a guy like a Walter Nolen, again, goes back to closing that talent gap, goes back to fortifying those lines of scrimmage, goes back to being able to compete against Alabama, against Georgia on the line of scrimmage. That's what it's going to take. Because the offense is there now. We feel pretty confident in saying that. The offense is going to be there semi-consistently. You can probably lean on that. But having those big bodies up front, being able to make teams one-dimensional, being able to win up front on 4th and 1, being able to get those goal line stands, it starts with adding guys like a Walter Nolen to your football team. So him visiting Ole Miss is one tremendous, self-awareness by Lane Kiffin and tremendous, I think, step in the right direction if you're an Ole Miss fan. Now, here's what I will say, too. Talk about, how this impacts the portal. Lane Kiffin's going to raid that thing. He always does. Like Walter Nolen visiting Ole Miss, is it really a surprise? To me, this is just Lane Kiffin doing Lane Kiffin things. The last 2 years, he's bodied the portal. It's what he does. He takes advantage of the portal. In 2022, they had the number 1 transfer portal class according to us here at On3. They took 18 transfers, including Jackson Dart. I would say it worked out okay. Now in 2023, they had a top 10 portal class. They took 24 transfers, one of which also including Trey Harris, who just announced he's coming back for another season. Said, run that back, Turbo. We love to see it for the good folks in Oxford. He's going to live through the portal, is Lane Kiffin. He's going to make sure he gets a proven commodity and is able to add those kind of pieces to his roster to compete right away. They'll recruit well at the high school level, I promise you. They will. But being able to recruit through the portal, I think, is Lane Kiffin being on the cutting edge of college football. And he was in on this thing early on when it first kind of became a little bit more maneuverable and navigable with the transfer rules and things like that. Early on, they were at least. Lane Kiffin continues to take advantage of the resources that he has at Ole Miss. Because I'll say this too. You don't sign that many transfers in back-to-back years if you don't have your NIL ducks in a row. And it's interesting to me that Lane Kiffin's name keeps coming up in some of these jobs every offseason, like the Auburn job a season ago. People will always throw his name out with the Alabama job by nature of his ties to Nick Saban. And like, I get it. I do. He's a great coach. I'm all about it. I'm here for the Lane Kiffin juice to other places as well. No pun intended with his dog. But like, I'm here for it because I think he probably deserves it to some degree. But I would also say, at what point in time do we just say, hey, he's a great fit at Ole Miss? Like Lane Kiffin, just so we're keeping it a buck, like he's not for everybody. Most great people aren't for everybody. Nick Saban, he's probably not for everybody. Kirby Smart, he's not for everybody. Lane Kiffin, in a different way, isn't for everybody. He beats to his own drum. He's going to attack the portal. He's going to do the things on Twitter that he does and be first team all troll. And y'all, as a college football fan, I love it. I love it. I'm here for it. But it works at Ole Miss. It works at Ole Miss. He's able to use the portal, get guys like Walter Nolen on campus. Like, this is massive. This is massive. Like, he continues to utilize his resources. And here's the thing. He beats to his own drum. In Ole Miss, they support him. They champion him. They're leaning all the way into the Lane Kiffin experience, and they're winning football games because of it. So all this talk around Lane Kiffin leaving for other jobs, I understand it. I think it's warranted. But at the end of the day, Lane Kiffin may not need to leave for another job. If he adds guys like Walter Nolen and gets more people like him on campus of that 6'4", right around 300-pound freakish defensive lineman mold, why would you leave Ole Miss? Got everything you need right there. Clearly the NIL resources to sign the transfers you want. Clearly there's enough of an attraction there for Lane Kiffin being able to get those guys on campus. And again, I think Walter Nolen, just to kind of put a bow on this thing, landing a guy like Walter Nolen is the next step for Lane Kiffin getting to where he wants to go. I understand the noise around other jobs. I do. But Lane Kiffin, if he lands guys like Walter Nolen and starts landing more guys of his skill set, Ole Miss is going to be a force, even more so than they are right now. Because I think they're right there. By nature of how this last season went, I think they're right there. But you fortify those lines of scrimmage, then you have what it takes. There's a book by Trevor Mawad, who is, or rest in peace, he was a mental strength coach, more or less, for some of the top college football schools in the country, from Georgia to Alabama. He worked with Smart, he worked with Saban, he worked with Jimbo Fisher at different points in time. And he has a book called It Takes What It Takes. And the whole premise of the book is you don't really have options if you want to achieve a certain outcome. Like for Ole Miss, if they want to win the SEC and win national titles, you don't have an option for the kind of player you have on your defensive line. It's guys like Walter Nolen. And so to me, this is Ole Miss taking what it takes, doing what it takes to get to where they want to go. So credit Lane Kiffin. I'm excited to track this recruitment of Walter Nolen. I'm sure he will have his options. We'll see if he has any other visits lined up. But again, already visited Oregon, going to visit Ole Miss. This is massive for Lane Kiffin. And again, I think Ole Miss is right there on the doorstep. Land a guy like Walter Nolen and more guys like him. It's going to be scary. Make sure you subscribe. We appreciate y'all so much. Going to keep this party rolling. We will see y'all next time. Hey y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.